So I came out of this game feeling something that honestly I haven't felt in a while watching the All Blacks, and that is optimism. The performance was not perfect. Ireland found ways to trouble New Zealand, particularly around ruck speed and set piece, and I will come back to both because they're definitely areas to watch out for. But New Zealand won 40 points to 21, scored 6 tries, and the deeper I went into the numbers, the more interesting this performance became. What encouraged me was how many different parts of the team contributed to the result. The scoreline looks comfortable, but the route to it is much more revealing than the margin alone. The All Blacks kept finding the line, answering Ireland's scores, protecting the ball, and making their defensive moments feel much more physical. So in this video, let's look at the statistical review. As usual, we're going through the attacking shape, the 22 entry efficiency, kicking and territory, breakdown speed, defensive identity, the turnover battle, and then the individual player maps. The main question is pretty simple. Was this merely a good win at Eden Park? Or are there signs here of an All Black side developing a game that can hold up against the best teams? Let us start with the scoreboard, because even that tells us something important about how New Zealand won. New Zealand scored 40 points through 6 tries and 5 conversions. Ireland scored 21 through 3 converted tries. So this was not a result padded by taking threes every time Ireland made an error. New Zealand had to keep converting pressure into tries. 6 different All Blacks scored them as well, spanning a lock, a number 8, a wing, an impact hooker, a fullback, and an impact center. The scoring came from several parts of the team rather than one hot player or one repeated maul platform. Ireland deserve credit too. Their 3 tries came at 3 different pressure points during Luke Jacobson's yellow card period, immediately after halftime, and later in the second half when the margin came back to 14. Ireland found 3 proper answers. The momentum chart shows how New Zealand responded to each one. The All Blacks took 14 minutes to score, but once Patrick Tuipulotu crossed, the match started moving quickly. Tuipulotu scored at 14 minutes. Adi Savea scored from the back of the scrum at 21 minutes. Ruben Love converted, and New Zealand were 14-0 ahead. Then came the dangerous moment. Luke Jacobson received the yellow card in the 27th minute. Now, there's a lot of controversy over this decision. Just looking at those replays, it must be said that Luke Jacobson was probably very lucky not to get a red for that one. On a different day, a different referee, that could have been a red quite easily. But anyway, Ireland used the extra man during that period, and Jack Conan scored, and the lead came back to 7. But this is one of the parts of the performance that should encourage All Black supporters. New Zealand did not merely survive the card, they scored twice while playing with 14. Will Jordan scored almost immediately after Ireland's try. And I think that's where Ireland would probably be feeling very, very disappointed. They just managed to bring down the deficit to 1 score. And then they just give away a very, very soft try to someone as lethal as Will Jordan. Asafa Aumua scored before halftime. So across New Zealand's own yellow card period, the All Blacks outscored Ireland 14 points to 7. That changed the emotional shape of the match. Ireland had worked hard to get back to 14-7, but before they could settle into the game, New Zealand were 28-7 ahead. Ireland scored first after halftime through Joe McCarthy. New Zealand answered through Damien McKenzie. Ireland then scored through Hugo Keenan and again reduced the margin to 14. New Zealand's final reply came through Anton Leonard-Brown in the 78th minute. Every time Ireland gave themselves a chance to change the pressure of the match, New Zealand found another score. The All Blacks didn't control every minute, but they were much better in the moments that carried the highest value. And that brings us to how each attack actually generated damage. On the horizontal axis, we have post-contact meters per ruck. On the vertical axis, line breaks per 100 rucks. So the further right a team sits, the more post-contact ground it generated relative to its ruck volume. The higher it sits, the more often it broke the defensive line. Why am I looking at it per ruck? because if you look at total numbers, you're not taking into account possession. So rucks are essentially, in rugby terms, the equivalent of a phase ending. So 100 rucks meaning per 100 phases, how much line breaks, how much post-contact meters did you gain? And that's what we're trying to look at. There's one important warning before reading this chart, though. RugbyPass recorded 197 post-contact meters for New Zealand and 154 for Ireland. And this is as of about 5 hours after the game. Those totals, to me, look unusually low for a completed test match. So I'm treating the post-contact side of this chart as exploratory. I'll have to check again tomorrow in the morning if the numbers still hold, but I wouldn't use it to declare a definitive winner on the collision battle because the numbers look relatively low. Within that limited feed, Ireland was slightly higher in post-contact meters per ruck, 1.5 against New Zealand's 1.37. But look at the vertical separation. New Zealand generated 10 line breaks from 144 rucks won. That works out at 6.94 line breaks per 100 rucks. Ireland generated 5 from 103, or 4.85 per 100 rucks. That fits what we saw. Ireland could win a collision and recycle quickly, but New Zealand were more likely to turn a sequence into a genuine breach. The All Blacks repeatedly threatened Ireland with width. Ireland's defenders had to push hard to cover the edge, and then New Zealand could tighten the attack with pick-and-go carries or attack the space created inside that movement. The line speed was not simply stopping New Zealand. At times, the All Blacks used the speed and direction of that Irish line to create the next space. The post-contact figures stopped me from making a sweeping collision claim. What I can say with far more confidence is that New Zealand turned its ruck possession into broken field opportunities far more frequently. This might be the most important team chart in the entire review. The horizontal axis is visits to the opposition 22. The vertical axis is points scored per visit. New Zealand entered the Irish 22 9 times. Ireland entered the New Zealand 22 8 times. That is almost even. Ireland had enough access to make this competitive. The teams created a similar number of scoring opportunities, despite what the final margin might suggest. The separation came after the entry. RugbyPass has New Zealand at 4.4 points per visit and Ireland at 2.6. That's the difference between reaching the 22 and actually making the entry hurt. New Zealand scored 6 tries from 9 visits. Ireland scored 3 from 8. The All Blacks did not need a large number of chances because their best chances became tries. This is where the variety of the attack matters. They could play wide, they could come back to the short carry, they could use the scrum through RD, and they had strike runners capable of pushing a handling error immediately. Ireland, by comparison, often had to build for longer. Their 32-phase defensive stand late in the game was outstanding. But long sequences also increase the number of decisions and cleanouts required before a score arrives. When Ireland had the ball, too many possessions ended before the pressure became points. If this efficiency continues throughout this season, then it is a serious reason for optimism. The obvious caution is that points per entry can move dramatically from one match to another, but in this match, it is the cleanest explanation for the scoreboard. This chart compares kicks per 100 rucks with territory. Both teams are well to the low kicking side of the historical median. New Zealand kicked 24 times from 144 rucks won, which is 16.7 kicks per 100 rucks. Ireland kicked 15 from 103, or 14.6 kicks per 100 rucks. The All Blacks still finished with 56% territory compared with Ireland's 44. That's interesting because New Zealand did not buy territory by launching kick after kick. They retained the ball, moved Ireland around, and used the boot as one part of the attack rather than as the entire plan. The aerial work also looked far more assured than it has at times. Geordie Barrett and Ruben Love dealt with pressure in the air, and Josh Moby's technique receiving the ball over his shoulder gave New Zealand another calm option in the backfield. I would still avoid claiming every New Zealand kick was attacking purely from this number. Volume does not give us kick outcome or contest quality, but paired with the territory result, and the match footage, it suggests that the All Blacks were not kicking because they had run out of ideas. They were comfortable holding the ball, and when they kicked, Ireland did not turn that exchange into a territorial advantage. Now we get to an important counter-argument. This chart asks whether a team wins contact and then produces quick ball. Again, the post-contact values need the same warning. The feed is unusually low, so the horizontal reading is provisional. Ireland recycled 45% of their rucks inside 3 seconds. New Zealand managed only 29%. That is a big difference. Ireland were able to produce fast possession, especially when their cleaners arrived accurately and removed the threat around the ball. The limited post-contact feed also places Ireland slightly ahead per carry, 1.24 meters to New Zealand's 0.99. So if somebody says the All Blacks were completely dominant in every physical area, I don't think the data supports that. New Zealand's attack was effective despite slow measured ruck speed. They found the line breaks and points without consistently living on sub-3 second possession. And that was probably a deliberate tactic this time around. Rather than focusing on speed, they focus on accuracy and timing. That can be read in two ways. Positively, the All Blacks didn't need perfect ball to create, and more cautiously, 29% fast ball is something better defensive teams may punish if New Zealand cannot reproduce this finishing efficiency. So as an All Blacks fan, there's plenty to like here, with an obvious area still needing work against stronger defensive pressure. The breakdown chart compares turnovers won against ruck speed. Both teams won 5 turnovers. Ireland's dot sits much further to the right because of its tempo, but neither side gained a theft advantage. So I wouldn't call the contest a breakdown demolition by either side. Ireland achieved one major part of their likely plan. They cleared hard, protected their own possession, and generated speed. New Zealand still found steals of their own. The distinction here is philosophical. Ireland prioritized speed and still found 5 steals. New Zealand accepted a slower attacking ruck profile but matched Ireland's defensive return over the ball. Quick ball should expose an unset defense, but it still requires the right pass, handling, and support picture on the next phase. That next action quality becomes important when we reach the turnover charts. This chart puts tackles made on the horizontal axis and dominant tackles on the vertical axis. Ireland made 246 tackles. New Zealand made 165. That is an 81 tackle difference. Ireland were forced to work enormously hard without the ball. Joe McCarthy made 25 tackles, Sam Prendergast 22, Jack Conan 21, and several others were in the high teens. But Ireland recorded only 2 dominant tackles as a team. That's the difference between completing a tackle and controlling the collision. Ireland often got the carrier down, but New Zealand could still preserve enough momentum or presentation quality to keep the phases going. New Zealand made fewer tackles, but recorded 10 dominant tackles. Their tackle completion was also slightly higher, 92% against Ireland's 88%. Within its smaller workload, the All Blacks' defense produced more backwards or disrupted carries. That physical imposition was important because it changes the next ruck. A dominant contact gives the line time to reset and makes the cleaner's job harder. But New Zealand had more moments where the tackle itself changed the shape of the next phase. This is a slightly revised clean engine chart from my previous videos. This is based off of feedback from you guys as well. The horizontal axis is total own ball set piece retention, weighted across scrums, lineouts, and restarts. But the vertical axis, it combines penalties conceded and I added turnovers lost as well. And it is obviously reversed. So fewer errors place a team higher. Ireland actually had the better platform, 90.3%, compared with New Zealand's 86.2% at set piece. That's important because set piece was one of the major pre-match questions. Ireland were not beaten simply because their scrum and lineout collapsed. Their own ball platform was competitive and on this measure, cleaner than New Zealand's. The difference is the vertical axis. The New Zealand's 9 penalties contributed to a combined error of 18. Ireland conceded 1 fewer penalty, but its combined errors climbed to 25. Ireland had the better set-piece number and even conceded one fewer penalty. The remaining gap came from giving the ball back to New Zealand, which the next two charts unpack very accurately. Combining turnovers and penalties exposes that contrast. Ireland's set piece gave them the right to play, but the possession frequently ended before the platform could pay them back. New Zealand weren't flawless either. Their error burden, which is penalties conceded and turnovers, were 18, and that obviously leaves room for improvement. But they produced far less self-inflicted damage overall. This is the defensive system proxy that I've been monitoring. I'll state the caveat once. Passes per tackle attempt cannot definitively identify a defensive system by itself. Opponent behavior affects it too. I use it as a style clue and not as 100% proof in terms of what defensive style each team is trying to use. Both axes are reversed, so the desirable corner is at the top right. Further right means fewer opposition line breaks conceded per 100 opposition rucks. Higher means fewer passes before a tackle attempt, which looks more like blitz. Ireland's defense sits higher at 0.91 New Zealand passes per Irish tackle attempt. That's the more aggressive blitz-like profile. The line break rate is the same one from the attack shape chart, now viewed from the defense's side. Ireland conceded 6.94 per 100 New Zealand rucks. This fits what the game looked like. Ireland flew up, but New Zealand found ways to manipulate that movement. They could go wide to make the line chase, then come back to the short carry. They could overload one side, force defenders to commit, and attack the space created by the speed of the defense. New Zealand's defense sits lower at 1.19 Irish passes per All Black tackle attempt. So the profile is more drift-like on that same line break measure. It conceded only 4.85 per 100 Irish rucks. In other words, New Zealand surprisingly allowed Ireland to move the ball more before contact, but protected the gain line and the space behind the line more effectively. Ireland looked more aggressive, but New Zealand were stingier. That's a really interesting defensive result because it suggests the All Blacks did not need to win the optics of line speed to win the outcome of the phase. This is the chart that explains why so much Irish axis failed to become points. The horizontal axis is turnovers won, the vertical axis is turnovers lost. Reversed, so better ball security is higher. Both teams won 5 turnovers, so the difference was not that New Zealand stole the ball at twice Ireland's rate. New Zealand lost 9, Ireland lost 17. And remember the volume. New Zealand made 199 carries and won 144 rucks, yet still lost the ball only 9 times. Ireland made 124 carries and won 103 rucks, but lost it 17 times. Relative to rucks won, that is roughly 6.3 turnovers lost per 100 New Zealand rucks versus 16.5 for Ireland. There is an enormous separation in ball security. This is the missing context for Ireland's earlier tempo advantage. Too many sequences ended through handling errors, lost control, or poor execution before the pressure could accumulate. The theft count was level. Ball retention was nowhere near level. This supporting chart separates the turnovers lost into a forced component and a residual unforced component. New Zealand's 9 losses split into 5 forced and 4 unforced. Ireland's 17 split into 5 forced and 12 unforced. That reflects the frustration of Ireland's afternoon. New Zealand certainly applied pressure, but not every Irish loss required an extraordinary defensive play. Some were simply possessions that Ireland failed to complete. Will Jordan's try after the handling error is the obvious match example. Ireland had worked extremely hard for their first score. Then New Zealand received a short route back to the line. That is brutal at test level. Against an attack converting 22 entries at 4.4 points a visit, a soft turnover can become 7 points before the defense has time to recover emotionally or structurally. The left side here shows where each team used its possession. The right side gives us 3 late game control indicators. New Zealand used 41% of their possession in their own 22 and another 36% in the rest of their own half. Ireland used 25% in their own 22 and 46% in the rest of their own half. Both teams recorded only 4% of their possession inside the opposition 22. New Zealand spent 77% of its possession in its own half, yet still produced the match's stronger line-breaking profile. That gives us another clue about the threat they carried from deeper positions. New Zealand led for 71 minutes. They had 71% of the possession in the final 10 minutes and scored the only 5 points of that closing period. After Ireland held out that 32-phase sequence, the match could have become messy, but New Zealand recovered the ball after the missed touch finder and eventually found the final try through Leonard Brown. They did not spend the last 10 minutes merely protecting a lead. They finished with the ball and added another score. Now we move to the individual maps. The carrier chart compares defenders beaten per carry with total meters per carry. RugbyPass does not provide player-level post-contact meters here, so this is total carrying output rather than a pure collision measure. Damien McKenzie is the major New Zealand outlier. 15 carries, 114 meters, and 8 defenders beaten. That is 7.6 meters and 0.53 defenders beaten per carry. This is not empty backfield mileage. McKenzie was consistently turning possession into a defensive problem, and he added a try. Caleb Clark made a sharp impact from the bench, 6 carries, 43 meters, and 4 defenders beaten. Josh Morby beat 5 defenders from 11 carries, even though his total meters per carry were more modest. That gives New Zealand different carrying profiles. McKenzie and Clark produced explosive gain. Morby repeatedly made the first defender work. Ireland's standout was Hugo Keenan, 93 meters from 8 carries, 11.6 per carry. With 2 defenders beaten, he was Ireland's clearest source of big field gain and later scored their 3rd try. Ireland had an excellent individual carrier. New Zealand had more damaging carriers distributed across the backfield and their bench. The enforcer map compares tackle workload per 80 minutes with dominant tackle percentage. Patrick Tuipolotu made 7 tackles and 3 were recorded as dominant. That is 42.9%, which is a huge rate. Although the 7 tackle sample means we should keep it in context. Still, 3 of New Zealand's 10 dominant tackles came from Tuipolotu in only 57 minutes. Asafo Aumua, Ethan de Groot, Luke Jacobson, and Adi Savea each added a dominant tackle. New Zealand's physical return was spread beyond Tuipolotu. Ireland's chart looks completely different. The team chart already showed the scale of their workload. Here McCarthy, Prendergast, and Conan still among the busiest individuals, while the dominant outcomes remain quite rare. That supports the team picture. Ireland were busy and brave, but too often they were absorbing New Zealand rather than stopping the All Blacks on New Zealand's terms. The Jackal map compares turnovers won with penalties conceded. Fewer penalties sit further to the right, so the best return is high and right. Adi Savea won 3 turnovers without conceding a penalty. That is outstanding breakdown value. He scored from the scrum, made 13 carries, completed 17 tackles, and still produced the cleanest Jackal return in the match. Quinn Tupaia won 2 turnovers while conceding 1 penalty. For an outside centre, that is a significant contribution around the ball and another sign of how New Zealand found defensive value beyond the loose forwards. We've always had worries at number 13 for New Zealand. I think Quinn Tupaia had a wonderful game tonight. Ireland's 5 turnovers were spread across Dan Sheehan, Gary Ringrose, Jack Conan, Jamison Gibson-Park, and Josh van der Fleer. So Ireland had several contributors. New Zealand had the match's outstanding specialist performance through Savea, backed by Tupaia. This is a sort of hidden possession work that makes an efficient attack even more dangerous. A turnover does not merely end the opposition's phase, it can give McKenzie, Jordan, or Clark a less organized defensive picture to attack. This chart looks at playmakers and relevant kicking replacements. The horizontal axis is defenders beaten per carry. The vertical axis is try assists per 80. And bubble size represents kicks. Sam Prendergast handled the largest kicking load with 8 kicks and added 1 try assist. He also beat defenders at the highest rate among those selected Irish playmakers. But there were a few turnover ball due to some of his handling errors, and also he missed a couple of touch finders as well. which again handed ball back over to the All Blacks. So Ireland's 10 was being asked to create, carry, and control territory from one central role, but New Zealand distributed the work between Ruben Love, who kicked 3 times, Geordie Barrett 4, and Damien McKenzie twice. McKenzie supplied the strongest running threat already shown on the carrier map, while Love managed the scoreboard perfectly with 5 conversions from 5 attempts. None of those 3 recorded the try assist captured on this chart. That's not necessarily a weakness. It shows that New Zealand's creation did not need to be funneled through a single designated playmaker. Roygaard, Lord, and Jordan supplied the assists elsewhere. Love, Barrett, and McKenzie could shape the defense, move the ball or carry, and the decisive pass could come from another position. That distribution makes the attack harder to shut down by targeting 1 or 2 players. The final player chart looks at players with at least 4 carries and 6 tackles. Meters per carry sit on the horizontal axis, while dominant tackle percentage sits vertically. The final map brings the attacking and defensive work together. Patrick Tuipolotu sits high because 3 of his 7 tackles were dominant, and his 13 carries plus the opening try at the other side of the performance. The tackle percentage is amplified by the smaller sample, but his overall influence is still clear. Asafo Aumua gave New Zealand 10 carries, a try, and 1 dominant tackle from 9. Adi Savea brings together the carrying and tackle workload with the breakdown return already shown on the Jackal map. Ethan de Groot and Luke Jacobson also appear above the 0 line for defensive dominance. These are the players who allow a team to maintain physical pressure on both sides of the ball. Hugo Keenan is Ireland's clearest 2-way outlier. The chart brings together the carrying threat we saw earlier with 1 dominant tackle from 10 attempts. Keenan was excellent, but New Zealand had a broader group contributing across attack, defense, and the breakdown. That depth of influence is one of the strongest reasons the performance feels more sustainable than a win driven by one superstar. So, should All Blacks fans feel optimistic after this? I think so. Ireland exposed enough weaknesses to keep the reaction grounded. Their ruck speed and set-piece platform were both better. They created genuine scoring access, and players like Hugo Keenan and Joe McCarthy had excellent matches. But New Zealand joined the important pieces together more consistently, damaging the line, finishing its visits, protecting possession, and making its defensive contacts count. The clearest pressure test came during the yellow card, when the All Blacks scored twice instead of retreating into survival mode. The individual charts also showed contribution across positions and from the bench. No single player had to rescue the plan. Several players made it harder to defend in different ways. The concerns are still there. The attacking ruck needs to become a bit quicker. The set-piece platform needs to improve, especially if you're going up against South Africa. And the post-contact numbers on this data set is a little bit questionable because the numbers look so low, but I'll double-check this tomorrow. But if the All Blacks can add cleaner ruck speed and a stronger set-piece platform without losing this line-breaking threat, defensive physicality, and 22-meter entry efficiency, then this performance gives them something real to build on. That is where my optimism comes from. I'm optimistic because the problems are visible, but so are several ways this team can win a test match. Let me know which part of the performance you think is most repeatable. Is it the 22 entry conversion, the ball security, the defensive imposition, or the spread of individual attacking threats? And Irish supporters, I would genuinely like your read as well. Was the turnover count mainly execution, or New Zealand's pressure, or something in Ireland's attack that kept exposing the ball? Thank you for watching. Please do hit like and subscribe and hit that bell notification and share it with a mate who loves rugby. And I will see you in the next one.